Okay, so now on this slide, if you see, you have the North Indian chart representation format, and I particularly prefer North Indian chart because it's quite easy for me to identify the kendras. 1, 4, 7, 10. The 6, 8, 12. Uh, I am also comfortable using South Indian chart, but my preference is always a North Indian chart. I'm quite used to it, but I leave it to you. You can always draw this in the South Indian format and do it. It's a personal choice. I prefer the North Indian format. So now let's really try and make sense of how Arudha Pada of a house is calculated. Okay, so okay, let's assume that this is a say Leo Lagna. Okay, okay. Now say let's assume that the Lagna Lord Sun is actually in the third house, debilitated, but that's okay. Let's not get there now. So now the Arudha Pada of the first house is called Arudha Lagna, or you also call it A1. Okay, so the Arudha Pada of the first house is called A1, or it is also called AL, which is basically Arudha Lagna. Okay, now this is an important reference point, like how you would analyze a chart from the Lagna or the moon. Arudha Lagna is an equally important point, and I'll explain that during chart analysis. Okay, but do keep this in mind that it's a very important reference point. Another important reference point is Karakamsha Lagna. Okay, so always remember this golden rule: don't freeze your chart with one reference. Always make sure that you look at it from a holistic perspective and you consider multiple reference points. Okay, that's when you will get the true picture, otherwise you will go wrong. Okay, now in this case, as I said, the lord of the first house is 3 houses away from it. So 1, 2, 3. Now from the lord of the first house, you have to again move the same number of houses. So 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3. Now this is actually A1. So what I did, you have to look at the position of the lord of a particular house from that house. So in this case, the lord of Leo, which is Sun, is 3 houses away from it, and then from that house you have to count equal number of houses. So another 3 houses from the Sun, 1, 2, 3. Now this particular point is A1, or the Arudha Lagna. In this case, the Arudha Lagna falls in the 5th house from the Lagna. Okay, so the Lagna always remains the same. This is just an additional reference point called Arudha Lagna. In this case, the Arudha Lagna falls in the 5th house of the horoscope. Similarly, assume that Jupiter is placed here, okay, in the 10th house. Now if you have to find the Arudha Pada of the 5th house, okay, so the lord of the 5th house, basically Sagittarius, it's lorded by Jupiter. So you have to count the position of Jupiter from this house. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Jupiter is 6 houses away, and so from Jupiter count 6 more houses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Basically, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is actually A5. Okay, so the Arudha Pada of the 5th house actually falls in the 3rd house. Okay, the other way of looking at it is Venus is the lord of A5, right? Because A5 falls in Libra, and Libra is lorded by Venus. Now there is a very specific reason why I am bringing up this point. This has a lot of significance when you do horoscope analysis, especially Dasha Bhakti related analysis. where this will play a big role. Sometimes you will run dasha of a particular planet. It may not have a direct relation to the fifth house, but it could be the lord of A5, or that planet could be identical with A5. Say, for example, sun is identical with A5. So there is a possibility of childbirth or some event related to child during the dasha or bhakti of sun. So that I'm just giving you a broad hint, but I will explain that with proven examples in a subsequent lecture. Okay, so broadly I think this is the fundamental concept on how you typically end up arriving at the Arudha Pada of a particular house. Now that said, let me move to the next slide. Okay, I'm sorry, it's not that I do videos every day, so pardon me, I'm just getting there. Next, I want to cover the concept of Arudha exceptions. So while we talked about these rules, there are some exceptions that need to be taken into account when you look at Arudha. Okay, and there are 4 conditions, and trust me, many people have misunderstood those 4 conditions, and I really fail to understand why. But I think that's like a quintessential thing which needs to be taken into account. Right? So the other exceptions go like this. There are 4 exceptions that you need to remember. If the lord of the house is in the same house, okay, that is one. Right? If the lord of the house is in the same house, if the lord of the house is in the 4th house from that house, if the lord of the house is in the 7th house from that house, and if the lord of the house is in the 10th house from that house. Now this might sound a bit confusing, but let me again go back to the chart to explain this in greater detail. Just give me a minute, I'll just rub these off. Because if I don't make it graphical, you will not get it right. So okay, now assume that the first condition, right? Assume that sun is here. So in this case, basically means the lord of the house is in the same house, right? Because the lord of Leo is sun, and sun is in the same house. In this case, the Arudha Pada of the first house will be 10 houses away from this house. In this case, this is the Arudha Pada of the first house. That's one rule. Okay, so just keep it simple. Or for example, if I say Jupiter is here, in this case the lord of the 5th house is in the 5th house itself. So the Arudha Pada of the 5th house will be 10 houses away from here. So basically this house will be the Arudha Pada of 5th house, A5. Okay, so this particular example is to cover the exception where the lord of the house is in the same house. The Arudha Pada of that house is 10 houses away from the original house. Please remember the term original house. Okay. Okay. Now let me explain the second rule. I'll try and explain it here itself. Just assume that Venus is here. Okay. Now in this case, if the lord of a house, this is the second exception, if the lord of the house is 4 houses away from the original house. So in this case, it is Libra, it's Lord Venus, 1, 2, 3, 4, is 4 houses away from the original house. In this case, this house itself becomes the Pada. So this house, 6th house, is actually the Arudha Pada of the 3rd house, because its Lord is 4 houses away from that house. Okay, so just to repeat, if the Lord of the house is 4 houses away from the original house, then the same 4th house from the original house becomes the Pada of that house. Okay, I hope it is clear. I don't think I can explain it in a more clearer manner, but another way of explaining, okay, let's assume that Mars is here, okay, and if you are looking at Arudha Pada of this house, the 4th house, now the Lord of the 4th house, Mars, is 4 houses away from this house, hence this is the Arudha Pada of the 4th house, so this is A4. So this is what the second exception means. First exception, when the Lord of the house is in the same house, you move 10 houses away from the original house. Second exception, when the Lord of the house is 4 houses away from the original house, and in that case, the same 4th house from the original house is the Pada. Okay? Now, let me move to the third exception. The third exception is, what if the Lord of the house is in the 7th house from that house, or in the 7th place, or 7 houses away from that house? So for example, assume that Sun is placed here. Okay, in this case, the Lord of the Lagna, or the Arudha Lagna, okay, in this case, the Lord of the Lagna is 7 houses away from this house. In this case, which is exception 3, the 4th house from the original house becomes the Pada. So in this case, the 4th house becomes the Pada. Okay. Another example, and it's not just confined to Kendra or Trikona. This rule is applicable to any house. For example, in this case, if Saturn were to be here, okay, so the Lord of the 6th house, okay, is 7 houses away from the 6th house. Hence, the Pada of the 6th house will fall here. So, to again explain the rule, if the Lord of a house is 7 houses away from that house, the 4th house from the original house will be the Pada of this house. So, the Pada of the 6th house, okay, will fall in the 9th house from the natal Lagna. Okay, and the last exception is very similar to the condition where if the Lord of the house is 4 houses away from it. If the Lord of the house is 10 houses away from it, then the same 10th house happens to be the Arudha Pada of that house. So for example, assume that Mercury is here, okay, and we are looking at the Arudha Pada of the 11th house. So in this case, the Lord of the 11th house, or the Lord of Gemini, is 10 houses away, right? So in this case, this itself becomes the Pada for the 11th house. Okay, so now if I go back to these rules, you will be able to make better sense of it. So if the Lord of the house is in the same house, if the Lord of the house is in the 4th house from that house, right, then you have the Lord of the house in the I would say 4th house from that house, 7th house from that house, 10th house from that house. These are the exceptions that you need to remember. Same house, 4th house, 7th house, 10th house. And if you see, the next slide actually summarizes the correct method to calculate the Arudha Padas. Just a minute, I just rub my whatever I had done previously so that apologies. I just want to make sure that you all understand it graphically. Okay, now this table is actually the correct way to calculate the Arudha Padas. And as I mentioned, right, the exceptions you have to be very, very clear and careful. Okay, when I said if the position of the Lord, if the position of the Lord of the house is in the 4th house from the original house, then the 4th house itself becomes the Arudha Pada. Okay, if the position of the Lord of house is in the 7th house, then the 4th house from the original house becomes the Arudha Pada. Similarly, if the position of the Lord of house is in the 10th house from that house, then that same 10th house itself becomes the Arudha Pada. If you don't get this right, trust me, there will be a lot of confusion. Most of the softwares that I have come across do not calculate it properly, and you will go royally wrong in many of your predictions. And I can prove that, and I will demonstrate that in many of my subsequent lectures. So I would like to end this particular lecture with one say a practical example where we can try look at horoscope and then calculate the Arudha Padas of all the houses. Okay, again I am trying to use more user-friendly approach by adopting a blackboard kind of approach, so that there is no confusion when you end up calculating the Arudha Padas. So for example, let me assume that just give me a minute, I just want to consider a sample horoscope for which we can calculate the Arudha Padas. That way you will get a good understanding rather than assuming some random fictitious Lagna and all that. Just a minute. I don't know whether exceptions will really be there in it, but let me just quickly do that. Just a minute. So this horoscope is Capricorn Lagna. Okay, now I'll quickly draw the planetary positions. I think all done, right? Did I miss any planet? Yes. Okay, so now let's quickly calculate the Arudha Padas for this chart. Okay, now now for the first house, okay, the Arudha Pada, the Lord is 8 houses away from here. I mean the Lord of Capricorn, Saturn. So again move 8 houses from here. So this is A1. Okay, similarly A2. Now in the case of A2, the Arudha Pada of the second house, you have to make sure that you use the exception correctly. Now if you see, the Lord of the second house, which is Saturn, is 7 houses away from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the Arudha Pada will actually be the 4th house from this house. So this is A2. Similarly A3. Again beauty. You have to use the exception rule here. Here the Lord of the third house is 4 places or 4 houses away from the third house. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So this house itself will become the Arudha Pada. Similarly, A4, where is Mars? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So this is where A4 lies. A5, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This is A5 because now let's go to A6. Where is Mercury? So Mercury is again 3 houses away. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So this is A6. A7. Okay, again in A7 you have to apply the exception because the lord of the 7th lord moon is 4 houses away. Hence 1, 2, 3, 4. This house itself will be the Arudha for the 7th house. So A7. A8 again. Again for A8 you have to apply the exception because the lord of the house is in the same house. So you have to move 10 houses away from here as per the exception rule 1. So this is A8. Let's go to the 9th house. Now A9, Mercury is 12 houses away, for 12 houses from here. This is A9. A10, which is the Arudha Pada of the 10th house. Oh wow, one more time you will end up applying the exception rule. The Lord Venus is 10 houses away, so the 10th house itself becomes the Arudha Pada. So in this case, so from here, the Lord of this is 10 places away, so this house itself is the Arudha Pada of the 10th house. I think similarly you will have to calculate for the 11th house and the 12th house. But I think this is a beautiful example where we found so many exceptions, and I am again and again stressing and emphasizing on the fact that most of the softwares calculate it wrongly. You know, they are not using the exceptions, or they are misunderstood the exceptions related to the condition where the lord of house is 10 places away. They are again counting 10 places and considering the 4th house as the Arudha Pada, which is wrong. Okay, and again remember, this concept of Arudha Pada is a brilliant concept, and it is not just for any if the lord of house falls in Kendra or Trikona. This is applicable for every house, the house lord positions from every house. So as I said, again you can quickly refer to this. This is what you need to get it inscribed in embedded in your head. Okay, I mean there should be no confusion, and in the subsequent lectures I promise I will talk more about how to use these Arudha Padas, whether you use Vimshotri, whether you use Gemini. I will talk about some tried and tested techniques of how to go about using them successfully. And I'm sure all of you already know a lot of astrology and maybe using other brilliant methods. All I'm saying is this is an extra scoring point, and I would urge each one of you to start calculating Arudha Padas this way, and we will very soon see how to use it for predictive purposes. So with that, I thank you for being patient and hearing me out. To be honest, this is the first video that I'm doing, and maybe there is a lot of scope for improvement in terms of the way I explain or the kind of tools that I'm using to explain. I hope you found it reasonably insightful, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you. Good day. Jai Hind.